Hello and welcome to the BYU Library Family History webinar. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Olivia Tuller and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is on October 31st with Dave Obie. He will be giving a presentation on Update on Canada. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Kathryn Grant on easy ways to improve data quality in FamilySearch Family Tree. Before we begin, here's a little bit about Kathryn. After years on the sidelines, Kathryn began doing family history. Somewhat to her surprise, she discovered that she loved it. Her specialty is helping new family historians find success and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes she's made. Kathryn teaches Sunday classes at the BYU Library Family History Center and presents at other family history events. Her column on family history ran in the Nauvoo Times for about a year and is still available online. In addition, she's a regular contributor to the FamilySearch blog. Kathryn works as a technical writer and instructional designer with a focus on usability and process improvement. Her current work assignment includes developing training used on mobile devices. Besides family history, she loves uplifting music, thought-provoking books, and fresh raspberries. And we'll now turn the time over to Kathryn.
Great, Olivia, thank you so much. Well, everybody, welcome to our webinar today. I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to be here because I feel like this is such an important topic, and I hope that this will be a great experience for all of us. So here's what we've got on the schedule for today. First of all, we're going to talk about what is data quality in Family Tree, just so we're all on the same page for purposes of this webinar. And then why does it matter? And finally, 4 ways to improve quality. So let's dive into our first topic. What is data quality in FamilySearch Family Tree, and why does it matter? So there are a lot of aspects to quality, but I wanted to keep this really simple. So we're just going to focus on 2, and I think that most aspects of quality really do fit under these 2 key aspects. So the first one is accuracy, and the other is completeness. It really comes down to this question: how much can I trust the information that I see in Family Tree? When we have high accuracy and completeness, we have high trustworthiness. But when we have low accuracy and completeness, of course, it follows that the data is not very trustworthy. Why does data quality matter? Okay, there's an example. So really, in one way, it's just common sense, like it is for anything in life. What's the point of doing family history if we don't care about quality? Just like for these poor guys trying to ship their product, what is the point of shipping product if you can't get it safely to its destination? But you know what? There is another aspect that comes into play because we're working in a shared tree, in Family Tree, where we're all trying to build a pedigree of the human family. The reason data quality matters so much in a shared tree is that our contributions impact other users. So in any shared endeavor, whether it's a community project or family history or a family project, whatever it might be, it's so important for all of us to seek the common good because that gives us the best chance of success, right? If we're all working together. If we add low quality information to Family Tree, others may not realize it and they may make mistakes because of it, because they trusted the information to be good when it really wasn't. On the other hand, sometimes people do notice the problems and then they have to stop and clean up the low quality information instead of making progress on their own work. Now, I feel like I need to make something really clear here, and I have a slide about it towards the end, but I feel like I need to mention it up front. And that is that we're not talking about perfectionism here. We're not talking about don't you dare ever make a mistake or you're going to mess up the tree. It's not that at all. Rather, we're talking about being reasonably careful and accurate and following best practices that don't tend towards sloppiness or carelessness or low quality data. So I hope that makes sense. I would feel super bad if anybody left this webinar feeling discouraged. That's not the purpose of the webinar, because I feel like good data quality is within the reach of all of us. So with that being said, let's move into the next section of the webinar where we'll cover 4 ways to improve data quality. Just to set some expectations, I do want to say we're not going to focus on things like standardizing dates and places or formatting source citations. I saw some people on the call, on the participant list, who have been in other classes, and so you might laugh when you see that I'm not going to focus on reason statements because I love reason statements. They're so awesome. But the reason we're not going to focus on these things today is they are important, but it's possible to do these things and still have low quality data. As an example, suppose that I entered a birthplace for my ancestor, but it was wrong. But I standardized it, so it's standard, but it's still wrong. So we're going to actually move kind of back a level or up a level, however you would want to call it, to kind of a more conceptual level. I don't know what to say besides level, but where we're kind of a little bit, up at the 30,000 foot view and talking about principles and best practices rather than specific things like standardizing or formatting. So I hope that makes sense. So what we are going to focus on are the following 4 best practices for data quality. Number 1 is to build the tree from the tree. And we're going to explain all these, of course. Number 2 is to work by families. Number 3 is to avoid creating profiles, that's family tree profiles, based on only one source. And the last one is to use some of the amazing data quality tools that are available, both from FamilySearch and from third parties. Now, I can imagine that some people, after looking at that list, are saying, wait a second, are those approaches really easy? I thought you were going to show me something just super simple that I can do without much thought or effort. Well, not really. So, okay, these approaches are not just one-click silver bullet easy. Some thought and effort will be required. But you guys have probably noticed that the one-click silver bullet solutions in any endeavor, not just family history, often cause more problems in the long run. They look like a good shortcut, but they end up causing issues. So these approaches are easy enough even for beginners. And the great thing is they get easier the more you practice them, the more you do them. And finally, the most important point, I think, is that they are way easier than cleaning up the problems caused by low quality information. So it's better to do it right or to at least try to do good quality than to be sloppy and have to clean up a mess later. Cleaning up the mess almost always takes longer than if we had taken the time to do it carefully in the first place. So, one thing I noticed when I was working on this slide deck is that all 4 of these items have to do with context. Now, some people might be hearing that going, ooh, context, that's not a word I really use that much in my life. What do you mean by that? So let's take a minute and define the way that we're going to be using it. So context can be said to be the setting or environment or conditions around something that allow it to be understood and evaluated. And that's what we're doing in family history, right? We want to understand our families and we want to be able to tell if the information we have about them is trustworthy. Now we're going to play a game. Have you ever played this game where people will either like play a sound or show you a picture of something out of context and you need to guess what it is? So I've got the chat open, and for those of you who'd like to play this game, look at this little picture here and tell me what you think it is. So without knowing the context, what is your best guess of what this item is in this little picture. Okay, we've got ski poles, a taser, a snare, maybe like a hunting snare. Cousin Gordon, if I remember right, weren't you trying to like catch a skunk in your backyard? Maybe that's why. So a snare. Any other guesses? Those are really great guesses. I'm watching the chat. I don't see any other guesses. So here is the full context of this picture. This is actually a filament in a light bulb. But how on earth would we have been able to tell that without all the context? So without enough context, it is really easy to reach wrong conclusions. So to add high quality data, we need enough context to see clearly. And that's what these best practices are about. So in family history, what provides context? Well, there's mainly four things. There are more. I'm sure that you could think of some other things, but mainly about, I would say maybe 90 to possibly 95% of the context that we need to make good judgments in family history centers around dates like birth dates, death dates, around places. Where did they live? Where were they born? Relationships. Who are their parents? Who's their spouse? Who's their kids? And their occupations. Those occupations can often help us tell people apart. So now we're going to play another game. We've got 3 Alexander Entwistles here, and these represent profiles that actually exist in Family Tree. So I want to ask you, are these 3 guys the same or not? Well, how can we tell, right? So since we don't have audio participation on the webinar, I will just guess that most of you are saying, well, if you just go by the name, yeah, they could be the same people, but is it possible for more than one person to have a name of Alexander Entwistle, even though that's an unusual name? Yeah, it's absolutely possible. So when I've been working on my Entwistle line, they're from Lancashire in England, and there are a boatload of Entwistles in Lancashire. Not only that, they appear to love the name Alexander. So maybe there was some famous progenitor or something named Alexander, but I've noticed, at least on my lines, they use this name over and over. So we can't say that these profiles are separate or the same just based on the name. But now let's add some context. Okay, here's Alexander number 1. He's born in 78 in Lancashire. His parents are James and Isabella. He married a woman named Agnes, and he is an insurance collector. So we've got some good context on him. Let's look at the next guy. So he's born in 64. His parents are Thomas and Alice. He has a wife named Emma, and he's a farmer. Are these 2 guys the same? Nope, right? There's no way, if this context is correct for these 2 men, these 2 profiles cannot possibly represent the same human being because the context is too different. The information is too different. Now, here's a third profile. Is he the same as the other guys? Well, his wife's name is not the same, but do people ever marry more than once in this life? Yeah, of course they do. So could one of our Alexanders have married an Anne before he married Emma, or after, or before Agnes, or after? Yeah, it's possible. The trouble is this profile has so little contextual information that we can't really tell who this person is, let alone if he's the same as either of these other people. So context is super important in family history if we want to do accurate and complete work. So with that being said, let's go to best practice number 1, build the tree from the tree. What do we mean by that? Very simply, it just means to start from someone who's already in the tree. What are some options as far as that goes? Well, if you're just starting with family history, you can start from yourself and trace backward. Or you could find an ancestor a few generations back and continue tracing back in time. Or for a lot of us with full trees, if you have an ancestor and you really can't go back any further, you can go forward from that ancestor, what is called descendancy research. The opposite approach to building the tree from the tree is to add fragments. What do we mean by fragments? Fragments are small, isolated trees of just a few people, and they're typically based on only one source, like a census or a christening or a U.S. Social Security record. Here is an actual fragment that was created in Family Tree from the 1920 U.S. Census. And notice that it's just like a little floater out there. It's floating without any connection to a descendant or any connection to an ancestor. So why do there have been some trends lately of people saying that adding fragments is a good thing to do or positive thing to do. And in all fairness, they've got some good reasons for this. So I had one friend who was having a hard time working on her own lines, and for her, working on a fragment was at least something to do. Fragments, I was aware of a person who actually posted a blog post that she had just been told, erroneously in my opinion, that a good way for her to contribute to Family Tree was just to open up a census record and just put everybody on the page into Family Tree. Well, I had another friend who double checked that work and found that like 90% of the names that the person had added were duplicates. But it was fast. It doesn't take time. It doesn't take a lot of research because you're right there in the one source that you're using to add the fragment. And it gives the illusion of building the tree quickly. We think we're adding quality information and really making a contribution. But over the years, especially as I've looked at many fragments that have been added to the tree and cleaned up, probably hundreds, if not thousands, here are the problems that I've observed with fragments. So the information is often incomplete, like we saw for that fragment about Alexander and Twistle. There are often errors in names, dates, and places. And because of that, duplication rates are extremely high. And we're actually going to see some examples in a minute. Low quality fragments, so fragments that don't have enough context, they also attract incorrect sources, wrong relationships, and bad merges. And the trouble with that, as a lot of you may be aware, when we attach a wrong source in Family Tree doesn't know that it's wrong. They think it's right because they assume that users are going to attach correct sources. So they start giving us more sources like the bad one because that's how the algorithms work. So it bad data tends to snowball in Family Tree. Once we do a bad merge and add a wrong source and add like incorrect parents, then we start getting more sources with the incorrect parents, and people will tend to merge the kids, like they'll mix two families together and so forth. So the low quality just attracts more problems. Here's an interesting thing about fragments. One of the rationales behind adding fragments was that at least you get them in the tree and then it's pretty easy to figure out where they go. Well, that is turning out not to be the case. In fact, a friend of mine watched a couple of training videos on this approach, and in the training videos, in the example, they were trying to show how easy it is to put a fragment in the right place in Family Tree, but my friend looked into it a little bit with more detail, and both the examples were wrong. So they had added the fragment into the wrong families in Family Tree. I don't share that to criticize the person who made the video or the people who made the video because I'm very sure that they had good intentions, right? They didn't make a video to mess things up. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do that. What it does point out is how challenging it is to put a fragment into the tree, to put it in the right place correctly. The bottom line is that it actually takes a lot more time to research and repair a fragment than to just build the tree from the tree, to start from someplace reliable, add the information clean, rather than trying to fit in a little piece and figure out where it really goes. Let's go back to our little fragment that we looked at the beginning. So just to illustrate, and this is actually very typical of fragments, of the problems that we have with fragments. So I ran across this fragment as I was trying to do some research on one of my families, and and there was a possibility. I thought, okay, there's some similarities here to what I'm looking at, but in my family, but something's weird. So I did a little bit more research, discovered that the guy who was entered as Harry Masona is actually Henri Fabrien Maisonneuve, if I'm even saying that right, it's French. And he wasn't born in 1914, he was really born in 1913. Not a huge deal, right? But censuses have can be off by 1 or more years. The dad didn't have as quite as bad of a problem. The surname was still incorrect, which meant that it could serve me incorrect hints or not give me correct hints because the name was not right. The biggest problem came with mom, who was the one I was actually concerned about. So her name is actually not Margaret, it's Marguerite. And her last name is actually Biscay. She was born in a little village called Arret in France in 1888. So the birth year was wrong there as well, just off by a year. Again, not a huge deal, but we want to be as accurate as possible. Here's the clincher. Marguerite was already in family tree with the correct name, and not only that, she she must have had a cousin or something who was born in exactly the same place just a few years apart from her. And I actually, with all my, preaching of importance of not doing bad merges and whatever, I actually saw this other Marguerite, and I saw her immigration record, and the years were kind of fuzzy, and I thought, oh, there can't be two Marguerite Biscays. This has got to be my gal. And so I merged her in with the wrong Margaret. And then as I added more sources, I realized, oh my goodness, I've stuck her in the wrong family, put her with the wrong spouse. So then I had to take more time and clean it all up. And so this just illustrates this is the kind of thing that you run into when you're dealing with these little isolated bits of families that don't provide a complete picture. So you might be asking, okay, that's all fine and good, but how do I build the tree from the tree if my tree is full? I look at it and I honestly don't see any place where I can work. Well, there are tools and approaches that can help us find places where people may be missing on our tree so that we can build the tree from the tree. What's really interesting about this is even full trees, there are almost always missing people from those trees. As a teacher and a family history consultant, I've helped many people over the years, and I have only ever worked with one person where I couldn't find anybody to add to their tree. Everybody else, even though their trees looked full, there were still people missing. And I kind of suspect that if I'd had more time, I might have been able to find a place where people were missing from that one other tree. But this is actually very encouraging that even on full trees, there is almost always work to do. There's things that you can do to build that tree. So the key is to finding those missing people. They're actually pretty simple. Look for people without parents, so that's ancestral research. Look for people who live to adulthood who don't have spouses, and look for couples with few or no children. So there are a couple of family search tools that can help us improve the quality by improving the completeness of our family trees. The tree views are one tool that we can use. So I'm showing descendancy view here, but the other tree views can be very helpful as well. So in this example, notice that Anne Quabell has married somebody named Noah Harrison Turnell. I wonder if that ever tongue-tied her, that their names both end in ELL. Anyway, notice that Anne and Noah only have 3 kids. Could they have more? Yeah, they could. And notice that there's kind of a big gap between 1860 and 1866. So there are some opportunities to check out and see if we're missing anybody. Then also notice these little icons out to the side. Sorry, I need to take a little drink of water there. Um, The purple icons have research suggestions. The blue ones are for record hints. And so they may have records or point to records that have people who are missing. So for example, sometimes I've clicked a record hint and it has been for a marriage of this person, but their spouse was not already in family tree. So the record helped me know the spouse's name. So then I could find out more about the spouse, when they were born, where they were, when and where they were born, who their parents were, etc., so that I had enough context to add that spouse into family tree. Also, those same tools are available on profile pages. So research helps are right up here in the right-hand corner, like right-hand top of the page. Then also, if you look at the family members, you can notice if spouses are missing or if there are big gaps between children. Really, it's a matter of observance. It's a matter of kind of keeping our eyes open and watching for those things. There are also some great third-party tools. I'm not going to give the URLs right here, but I will later on, or you can Google them. They're not hard to find. But one wonderful third-party tool is Pilla. And both of these, the other is Virtual Pedigree, and they both use data from FamilySearch Family Tree. So it's not a separate tree. They're actually displaying the information from Family Tree. Well, notice on Pilla, the root person is here in the center, and then the branches move out in generations. Well, these branches stop right here. What if some of these people married and had kids? That would give you an opportunity to build out those branches. Here are some other people where the branches have just stopped. So they may need to be built out. This section may need to be built out. Virtual Pedigree actually gives you written hints, so it's a little bit different than Pilla, like just from looking at this view and saying, oh, this tree stopped. Here they've got color coding to say, okay, this person probably doesn't have children, but this person might, based on the information and the sources. This one probably has children based on the information and sources. And then we're going to also flag some missing parents here. So all of these tools can be used to help us find places in our tree that aren't complete where we can build the tree from the tree. Let's move on to the next one, work by families. Okay, what do we mean by that? To find reasonably complete information on a set of parents and their children, and to be systematic and intentional rather than random and haphazard. One of the best tools I know of to work by families is a tool called the Timeline Grid. I've got there's whole webinars on this, so we're only going to give a very high level overview on this, but I'll give a link to more information if you're not familiar with this tool, but you'd like to learn more about it. So this is a timeline grid on the screen, but let's break it down. Let's look at it in a little more detail. So a timeline grid, very simply, is just a table that you either create yourself or copy from a template. It centers on one nuclear family, so parents and their children. I tried doing it multi-generational and it was a mess. So I now limit my timeline grids to just one nuclear family, the parents and kids. It's most useful in countries and time periods that have regular censuses, and its power is that it shows you key family information, so a complete picture of a family organized in a compact space. Here's how a completed grid looks, and here are the high points of the grid. At the top of the grid, I will put the parents, so the couple that has the kids and the family. But then for context, I'll also put the parents of my relative. So in this case, Anne is my relative. She's like my 10th cousin twice removed or something, and she married Thomas Guy, who is only my relative by marriage. And then Anne, her parents, so that I have some context and can remember who she is, I put that she's the daughter of Matthew, and her mother's name is also Anne. In the first column, we put any kind of ID like a FamilySearch PID and vitals, birth, marriage, and death. And then in the other columns, we put information that we find in the census. Can you see how this is providing a picture of the family, a complete picture? They actually had more kids, they just don't fit on the screen. But we can see when they were born, when they moved out of the house, and in this case, when they married. So each person gets their own row. I've had friends who tried to put multiple people on a row. Doesn't work very well. It's just, even if it takes a little more space, it's easier to keep everybody on their own row. You can use color coding as visual cues. So in this example, the son, William Carter Guy, is living nearby but not at home. He's lodging with a nearby farmer and helping him on his farm. So I colored him orange and colored his enumeration information orange, and then the original information in black is for the parents who are still in their home. And you can link to sources, which makes it very convenient, easy to have the information at your fingertips, and you can also link to other grids. So if you are interested in more information, go to goldenrodgenealogy.com slash timeline underscore grid.htm. This is my website and it's totally free. There's no upselling, there's no premium or freemium or anything. It's just an effort of love. And so everything on the site is free and you're welcome to download it and use it in whatever way is helpful to you in doing your family history. So now that we've seen how simple it can be to work by families, if you have like a guide, a framework like the timeline grid, why is it so helpful to work by families? These are the benefits that I've observed. Working by an entire family, again, as opposed to random, just a person here or there or a fragment, working by entire families makes it easier to see and resolve inconsistencies. For instance, if somebody had made a grid on that 1920 census fragment, no other source said Masonite or what Masona. All the other sources had the correct name. So if all the sources had been considered together as a big picture, it would have been obvious what the correct name was, and that fragment would not have been entered with the wrong name. It also enables you to recognize multiple marriages and blended families so that you can enter them correctly in Family Tree, and we'll see an example of that in just a minute. It lets you see where children may be missing. So when you've got the whole picture, you can say, they were having kids every 2 years until there's this big gap in between the third and fourth children. I wonder if some kids are missing. And finally, it enables you to recognize duplicates again because you've got the context. You know the family well enough to recognize, oh, this duplicate here just has the parents, but I know that those are her parents, and so this is probably a duplicate. So it's very handy in these ways to help improve accuracy. Okay, let's move on to best practice number 3. And I'll have to tell you, I struggled over this one because I wanted to state it positively. Something like, always use multiple sources. But I didn't want it to be intimidating, and I also don't agree with people who say, or don't agree with the statement. I should not say I don't agree with people, but I don't agree with the practice or principle that some people say you must have at least 5 sources, or you must have at least 2, or you must have this or that. Family history is more of an art than a science, And not everybody has those magic 5 sources or whatever. And so we want to do our best, right? We want to be complete and accurate. But really, the bottom line is that creating a family tree profile based on only one source is problematic. And so I decided to leave it phrased negatively. I apologize for that, but I think there's a benefit to stating it that way. So you might be asking, why are you telling me that I should not create a profile based on only one source? I see it all the time. Well, here's the reason. There's a high chance of error when it's based on just one source, and there's a high chance of duplication. I do want to mention a little caveat here. Notice the little asterisk. In some countries and time periods, especially when you get farther into the past, there might only be one source. So we do our best, right? We use what we have. But in most countries, especially going forward from the 1800s, there are virtually always multiple sources. So we are able to build a good picture of the family, an accurate and reasonably complete picture, so that we don't have to rely on just one source to put information into Family Tree. So again, let's have some empathy here because people do not follow these kind of problematic practices because they're trying to cause problems. Nobody, almost nobody, okay, there are exceptions, but almost nobody wants to cause problems. We don't get up in the morning and go, I'm really going to mess up Family Tree today on purpose. I do not know anybody who says that. So, what are some of the reasons that might lure people into doing this type of thing? Well, sometimes they've been told that it's a good thing to do, like the example where I mentioned, where the woman had actually attended a class where the person encouraged people to just use a census record and enter everybody on the page. So she was told it was good, and she did it in good faith, thinking she was doing a good thing. It's fast and easy because you've only got one source, don't have to do research, and the problems are often not obvious. So people just assume that everything's okay because it looks fine. And another misconception is that sometimes I've had this experience where I've pointed out the problems and tried to do it in a really kind way, and people will say, "Well, that's okay because somebody's just going to clean it up later on." Well, that is probably not a correct assumption. There actually isn't any guarantee that someone's going to, number one, find the mistake, but then if they find it, are they going to realize that it's an error? What if they're a new user and they're just learning, and so they come to Family Tree trusting that the information is accurate, so then they just build on it. And then there are some people who will recognize the error and oh, excuse me, to go back, there are some people who may recognize the error, but there's still no guarantee that they will know how to fix it. A lot of these errors and duplicates really take intermediate to advanced skills to fix, which is again why it's so much better to put the information in accurately than kind of put it in haphazardly or inaccurately, expecting that it's going to be cleaned up. It really does take more time and effort to clean up these problems than to create a well-documented profile in the first place. People think that creating the well-documented profile is harder and takes more time, but it actually is easier in the long run and it saves time. So let's do another interactive activity. This is a source. I was attaching this source to my cousin, William Gunton, just the other day. And so I found him in the 1911 census. Let me ask you, and please feel free to put this in the chat, do you see any problems with this information? Is there any reason why I should not just add these 4 people who look like they need to be added to Family Tree? So I'm watching in the chat. Oh, Gordon, thanks for putting those links in. Yes, Lynn noticed that Elizabeth is not being entered correctly, with her maiden name. So we probably would not want to enter Elizabeth here because even if we clicked add and then we changed it to the maiden name, if we did the research, the source linker does not rerun the duplicate search. So we would have no way of knowing if we changed that name to be the maiden surname if there were duplicates in the tree already. But what about the kids? Is there any reason why I wouldn't want to add the kids? Nobody is putting any problems in the chat, and I agree because we're not seeing. Okay, Gordon, okay, two people have now. Gordon says there is an 8-year spread between the kids, so that could indicate an issue. And then Terrell points out that, yeah, 23 years and the generation is different between William and Elizabeth. Sue, to answer your question on that, that's a very good observation. Elizabeth is actually his third wife. So my William, bless his heart, he lost two wives before this time. And so he did end up on his third marriage marrying a woman who was quite a bit younger than he is. And yes, oh dear, is it Nodiah? Oh, you told me once how to say your name and I have not remembered accurately. So I hope it's either, I think it's Nodiah, but please correct me if I'm wrong about that. But she pointed out that the kids might be from different marriages, and that is exactly what happened here. So, but even then, watch what, like, as I went through, I'll kind of walk you through the discovery process because I looked at this and I was like, oh, Mabel Gunton, that's totally a Gunton name. They use Mabel all the time. They use Flory a lot. I'm sure these are just kids, either from this marriage, possibly an early one, but let's get these kids in the tree. I'm sure they belong. And so I looked for birth registrations of the children, could not find any. And they are in a time period where there should have been birth registrations. Maybe I couldn't find one of the kids, but not to find all three was a huge red flag. So I did more checking on that. Come to find out, Elizabeth's maiden name is Eltz, and obviously not Gunton. It would be very unlikely for a Gunton to marry a Gunton. It does happen, right? Two people sometimes do marry with the same surnames, but in this case, that did not happen. So her name is Elizabeth Eltz, or Elsa maybe. Before she married William Gunton, she was married to a guy named William Cross. I found myself thinking that that was very handy because she didn't have to worry about offending her current husband by calling him accidentally by the previous husband's name. William worked for both. So good for you, Elizabeth. That probably reduced a chance of marital conflict. But the kids were from her other marriage. They were not Guntons. They were Crosses. And I have seen this a lot in censuses, whether it's because the enumerator just assumes that the kids are from the current marriage, or the person who answers the door doesn't want to go into the long explanation. Yes, these are the kids from my wife's previous marriage or whatever. So for whatever reason, this is more frequent than you would think that children in blended families get given the current surname instead of their actual legal surname. So then I decided to do a manual search for duplicates, and look what I found. There's Elizabeth. She's with her previous husband, and Mabel and Clifford are already in the tree. So if I had added based on just one source from SourceLinker, I would have created 3 duplicates, all of them with the wrong surnames, and Mabel, Clifford, and Flory would have been connected to the wrong father. Here's another illustration of what happens when we don't work by complete families. Where's Flory? She totally got left out of the family where she belonged. So I thought, okay, long as I'm here, this isn't my family, but I don't want Flory to be lost, so I'm going to add her. Then I tried to add her. and I came across another fragment, a very low quality fragment that only had a birth year, no birthplace, had a spouse, had a kid. But I probably spent 45 minutes researching this fragment to make sure that I wasn't going to add a duplicate. So this is just another illustration of the problems that are caused when we put low quality fragments in the tree. They actually end up causing more time than good. So, by the way, if you're wondering, this did not turn out to be this Florence Mary Cross, despite the rather unusual name. This turned out to be a different person. They might be cousins or something. But anyway, so I did add Florence Mary, and she is in her right family. So I don't want to be misunderstood here. You might be wondering, so are you saying that you should never add a profile from SourceLinker? And no, that's not what I'm saying. Honestly, I do it all the time. But before doing it, I verify the people's basic information and I do a manual search to make sure that they don't already have a duplicate in Family Tree. And once I've done that, if I'm comfortable with the information, man, just click that add, make any little minor adjustments, and they're in the tree, profile created very easily, and the current source is attached. So SourceLinker is awesome for profiles as long as you do the necessary verification. And it really isn't that hard, to be honest. I will put SourceLinker up on one monitor and I'll put Family Tree up on the other, like a window where I can do searching or Ancestry.com or whatever. And I will just quickly do those sanity checks on my other monitor. And then if everything checks out, I come back to SourceLinker and add the person. I do want to give a caution here to avoid projects, and unfortunately, I have heard of people encouraging these projects where you add people from SourceLinker without any verification. The trouble is, as we've just seen, there's a high probability that you'll add duplicates and errors if you just blithely click add with no thought or care for accuracy. Okay, we are to our last best practice here. One of my favorite things is the amazing data quality tools that FamilySearch and others have provided for us. So in FamilySearch, one kind of possibly underappreciated data quality tool is just those research helps that we've already looked at a little bit. Profile quality score. I am such a huge fan of this new profile quality score. And then finally, we've also got a new merge analysis tool. Let's take a quick look, just like a 1 or 2 slide look at each of those. So research helps, as we've mentioned, are displayed in tree views and on profile pages. They can tell you about sources, they can tell you if children are missing, they can tell you if dates don't make sense. Oh, I forgot to tell you, remember back on that little fragment for Florence Mary Cross? Her son was born in 1928 and was given a death date of 1913. Yeah, obvious problem there. So that was a very low quality fragment. So Family Tree will catch things like that. They will say, hey, this person died before they were born, or this mother is having kids when she was 2. This doesn't happen. So these are really great tools that help us improve quality. If you want a really detailed explanation, here is a link to the Help Center article in the FamilySearch Help Center. Oh, I did not mean to do that, but you know what? Now that I've done it, I'm just going to pop this in the chat. Let's see, I can't type and talk at the same time. So we're going to say research helps article, and here is the URL. Okay, so if you'd like to learn more about that great tool, that's how you can do it. And we need to go back to full screen view. There we go. Okay, so that's about research helps. Profile quality score. How many of you have been to labs? I guess this is a rhetorical question since we don't have audio for participants. But FamilySearch Labs is a place where FamilySearch is piloting experiments. They call them experiments. These are tools that are not given, like they're not in the public tree yet, but you can enable them by going to FamilySearch Labs and then clicking the Try It button. So if you want to try this out, go to Labs, click the Try It button for Profile Quality Score. What you will get is a a rating at the top of certain profiles. And it's very simple. They tried on purpose not to make it overcomplicated. So it just displays a score of low, medium, or high on certain profiles. And if you click it, it opens up a panel that gives you guidance for improving the data quality. How cool is that? So I like this is just in my mind, this is a game changer. I don't have to look at this and wonder how good the quality is. Instead, I've got a star rating on 4 measurements. Is the data complete? Are the sources tagged? Is the data consistent with the sources? And is it free of conflicts? Well, this one got a super bad rating on is the data conflict free? No stars. The other ones have at least some stars, some ratings, a positive rating in terms of stars. But this one was so bad it didn't get any stars. Well, down at the bottom here, for each of the measurements, if there are suggestions available, they will give you suggestions. So you click this arrow and it pops down a little, I don't know what to call it, a pop down, I guess. It opens up this little thing where it tells you, oh, this person is missing a death date, or under conflicts, this person has a possible duplicate, or this person has, what's another example? Oh, has conflicting parents, or something like that. So this makes it super easy to fix some of the major problems on a profile. Now, is it perfect? No, it's absolutely not perfect. It's still a work in progress. So for that reason, take it for a drive. Find out what you like and what you don't like about it. If you find mistakes, like suppose that you looked at the rating and it said high, and then you looked at the data and you're like, that's not high. This is terrible. This is conflicting with this thing or with that thing. Well, click the feedback button and send feedback, which will help FamilySearch improve this tool so that it can be the best tool possible for us as we're trying to improve quality. I did want to mention that for the pilot, quality scores are only displayed for if these criteria are met. The user has to be using English as their language right now. Again, this is just the pilot. That's not going to be the case when it's rolled out. It'll be available to everybody. But for right now, you've got to have your user language set to English. Person has to be born between 1800 and 1920, and they have to be born in one of these locations: Canada, continental Europe, South America, United Kingdom, or United States. So for the pilot, they had to limit it, understandably, right? But when the tool is actually released for the public, I am sure that even if it's not available for everyone right away, they'll be moving towards that to let it be available for everybody, because who doesn't want to have good quality on their people and family tree? Merge Analysis View is a new feature. It used to be in labs, but it is now available to the general public. It's a tool for evaluating the correctness of a merge. Have you ever looked at a merge and said, ugh, I kind of think there's a problem there? Well, Merge Analysis View compares the person before the merge, the person, excuse me, the person who got archived, what they looked like before the merge, the surviving person, what they looked like before the merge, and then finally what the survivor looks like after the merge. So you can compare all three and look for problems or inconsistencies. The way you get to this is just in the changelog. So now if you open the changelog for anybody who's got a merge, there's going to be a merge analysis button. You click that and it opens up this view. If you'd like to learn more, here's a link to a FamilySearch blog article. Other data quality tools, we've talked about the timeline grid already, but here are a couple of others that I'd like to highlight. Tree Sweeper, Virtual Pedigree, and Pilla Premium has tools. Now, I'm not a premium subscriber and I don't get a kickback from this. So I'm just mentioning this subscription service to make you aware of it. I'm not even recommending that you pay for it. Just here's information. You can decide what you would like to do. So let's look at these three. We've already looked at the timeline grid. Tree Sweeper is something I think a lot of people are not aware of, and it is a tool that was developed by the BYU Family History Technology Lab. And so that's not the same as the Record Linking Lab, just in case you're wondering. So this is a different organ or different department. And so they have created this tool where you can enter in a PID. Let's see, it'll start by default with you, but if you don't want it to start with you, you can choose someone else, then put in that PID, and then it's got all these quality checks. So you can ask it to check everything that they check or only certain things. Like suppose I just wanted to check for christening problems, like the christening date before the birth or whatever. So you just specify your criteria and then you start the tree sweep. And when you do, it puts all the problems over here that it finds, and you can click for more information and download the results if you want to. This was not meant to be an in-depth analysis or review of this tool, obviously. So if you would like more information, we've got a webinar on this tool. Um, so check it out if you think that that would be helpful to you. Virtual Pedigree, made by the same department at BYU, the Family History Technology Lab. Here, you probably recognize this from before. The descendancy key, it will help you find people that either probably don't have children, so you don't have to research them further, but verify it. I mean, you don't just want to rely on this completely without checking. But especially, it will tell you if it looks like somebody might have children or probably has children, or if their parents are missing, or if there are possible record matches that might give you more information. So go to this link if you're interested in trying out this tool, totally free. It uses the data from FamilySearch, so it just displays it in a different way. And then finally, Pilla. If you pay the actually it's a really reasonable fee of $39.95, which given the cost of a lot of software that costs maybe hundreds of dollars, this for a year, $39.95 is a pretty decent price. And you get all these quality options here. So it will highlight records that probably contain a new person to add to the tree. It will help you see possible duplicates, etc. So if this is something you're interested in, or if you're already a subscriber, then maybe take a look at these and see if you're taking advantage of all these great tools. One caution I did want to mention is sometimes the third-party tools will encourage you to add names from SourceLinker without research or add names based on just one source. And again, these the people who create these tools are wonderful. They're not trying to encourage people to enter bad data. In my experience, they're usually doing this because they've been told that it's a good thing to do, or they've been told that the results will be accurate, but analysis shows that often they aren't. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? These tools are still good, but just be very cautious if you see a part of the tool that says, oh, you can go to SourceLinker here and add a bunch of people from SourceLinker. Probably you want to be careful with functions like that. So here's the slide that I mentioned at the very beginning that I had saved for the end, but I think if I ever teach this class again, I want to move it up at the front because I would not want anyone to leave this class going, oh, I feel so overwhelmed. I have to be perfect and put perfect data in Family Tree. That's not what we're saying. We're saying just be careful and follow best practices and avoid some of the problematic practices that are known to cause issues. So if accuracy is on a continuum, on one end, we have exhaustive research and absolutely perfect data. Is that going to happen for any of us? Well, it's never happened for me, and I honestly don't expect it to. But on the other end, we have just sloppiness. So doing things as fast as possible to dump names in the tree. Um, okay, I don't want to offend anybody here. Please know that I don't mean this offensively, but I've seen this happen with JetCom files. So I remember one time, oh my goodness, I had a friend whose husband had just passed away. And but she loves family history, so she's getting ready for a funeral, and then she gets in Family Tree and finds that somebody has dumped in a JEDCOM file with probably thousands of names that were not verified, and they were like most of them were duplicates of her tree. So she texted me in a panic going, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? There's all these names are duplicates and they're messing up the tree and people are reserving them for temple work." And so I helped her clean up those duplicates. That was an instance of when somebody had just added a bunch of names, not doing any checks for quality. That is the other end of the continuum. We don't want to be there either. So we don't want to be sloppy, but we don't want to beat ourselves up thinking we have to be perfect. Instead, we want to aim for what my friend Susan calls the sweet spot, where notice it's closer to the perfect end of the spectrum than it is to the sloppy end, but it's a place where we just do our best. We're careful. We fix mistakes if we make them. We don't beat ourselves up and we learn and grow. So we want to be aiming for the sweet spot and just doing our best to be careful in Family Tree and ensuring quality. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. Wow, we're right at the on the hour, so that's good. So by way of summary, we talked about how data quality in Family Tree involves accuracy and completeness. High quality data is trustworthy data, and that's what we want. We want to be able to trust it. We talked about 4 ways to improve quality: build the tree from the tree and avoid adding fragments, work by entire families so that you have the context, avoid creating profiles based on just one source, and use data quality tools to help you improve quality. So everybody, thank you so much for coming to this webinar today. And Olivia, do we have any questions or comments that we should address?
Irvine Family says, how do you get to the place you sign into Pilot?
Oh, and Gordon posted the link right below that. So Gordon, thank you so much for doing that. In fact, he's posted a bunch of links, and these are even different than the ones I saw before, I think. Gordon, thank you. Bless you for posting those links. That's so helpful. So. Any other questions? Yeah, Jody, I agree. Jody gave kudos to Gordon, and I second that. Thank you. So let me just scan in the chat quickly and see if I see anything that we need to address. I don't. I think we've covered everything. So, oh, Gordon, bless you. Gordon reminded me to put a link to the slide deck, which I said I would do. And Gordon, you'll be proud of me this time. So one time I shared the link and I had forgotten, like I put the link in the chat and I had forgotten to make it a public link. So everybody couldn't get to it. This time, Gordon, I thought of you and I remembered that I needed to make it public to everybody. So let me just grab this URL. And I'm not going to give it to you in edit mode because that would be a pain for you. I'm just going to go preview and select this URL. And this is a link to the slide deck, link to slide deck. There we go. Okay, and it looks like A. White has put in a question, but I'm not sure what you mean by that. It says Census Projects question mark. Can you elaborate if you were hoping for an answer to that? Oh, okay. A. White says some are adding to the tree from censuses like the 1910 US Census or the 1911 England Census. And yeah, that I actually participated in an audit that checked a sample of names added by those projects. The duplication rate was around 60%. The average rate. It actually ranged from about 47% as a low of duplication up to 80% as a high, with an average around 60%. So this was one of the things actually that prompted me to do this presentation, just because people are doing these things with the best of intentions. Everybody thinks, oh, the people who do them, I should say, hey, this is a great way to grow the tree, but then they don't realize all the issues and problems that come up with it. Like the people that were adding from these census records kept saying that the duplication rate was around 8%, which sounds fine, right? That's a really low duplication rate. But when the data was actually examined, when we examined a statistically valid sample of over 300 names, and that's how we found that the duplication rate was so high. So. So yeah, it's just never, oh yeah, A White says yes, they've given me many duplicates. So, and we also did, or actually I should say one of my friends mainly, I even participate in this? I don't think I did. One of my friends analyzed some of the repair work that was being done by volunteers on the census names, and the repair work was haphazard and again sometimes joined people to the wrong trees and so forth. So fragments are just they're just problematic. It's just a better quality approach to build the tree from the tree. So, oh, Gordon, thank you. Gordon mentioned that the websites we mentioned in the webinar allow you to sign in with your FamilySearch credentials, your FamilySearch login. So you don't have to have any special thing to sign on to these tools. Okay, Olivia, I will turn the time back over to you. Adele, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the webinar.
You bet. And thanks everybody for coming.
Yes, thank you so much everyone for joining us today. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is on October 31st with Dave Obie. He'll be giving a presentation on Update on Canada. A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fh_webinars@byu.edu or follow Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.